Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Joel Friedland. Joel has 42-year track record in the industrial real estate. He is also the co-founder of Epic Savage Realty Partners in 1991, where he oversaw hiring and mentoring 60 industrial real estate professionals, many of whom have become his partners. His group sold the firm to an international real estate company in 2014. Joel started Brit Properties. And Joel, as an industrial real estate broker and owner, has secured over 2,000 industrial property leases and sales, totaling over $2 billion in brokerage volume and $250 million in acquisitions. His greatest accomplishment is maintaining value relationships with brokers, tenants, investors, spanning over 5 decades. So, Joel, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Keith. It is great to see you.
Yeah, great to see you too. Appreciate you joining us, even being kind of on vacation or down in Florida. So, really appreciate it. Joel, I like to usually just start with, kind of where you grew up and what led you to real estate.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Highland Park. And from a very young age, I was a child entrepreneur. I started a landscape business when I was 14. And I went door to door convincing homeowners to let me cut their lawn and trim their bushes and do plantings and that kind of thing. And at 70 lawns, door to door canvassing in one weekend. And I couldn't handle, it's a lot. It was a lot. And so I was pretty good at that. I was pretty good at convincing people to let me be their landscaper, but I wasn't so good at executing because I had 70 lawns a week to cut, and one person can't do that. You need a crew, and you need a truck, and you need lots of lawnmowers and lots of equipment. So I went out to a landscape supply company, and I made a deal with them to sell me 5 lawnmowers and just total like bags and bags of fertilizer. And they delivered it to my house. And my parents didn't know that I did this. So one day, my father comes home from work and he decides he's going to park his car in our garage. And he opens the garage and it's just chock full of bags of Scott's fertilizer and lawnmowers in boxes. Wow. And he said, comes in the house, he says, "Young man, what is going on?" And starting that season, I hired about 30 kids from my junior high school and high school. I had to have older kids who could drive the truck.
Yeah.
It was really, so it was a lot. It was very much. My mother always reminds me that I'm a troublemaker. So I've got a history of being an entrepreneur. And after graduating from the University of Michigan, I decided to get into real estate, and I knew a family, not my family, in industrial real estate. And in 1981, they hired me to be a leasing agent. They had 6 million square feet of industrial in Chicago, and they had about 80 buildings, and 10 of them were vacant. And my job, day one, was to go door to door, like I did when I got the lawns, go door to door, but to industrial companies, asking them if they would consider moving into one of our vacant buildings. And I made 9 deals in that first year out of the 10 vacant buildings. There was one that was a persistent vacancy. And I can tell you why. I know what was wrong with it.
Right.
And I became an agent. And so for many years, I was a leasing agent and sales agent, just a broker.
Mhm.
And about 10 years in, I decided I wanted to be a syndicator. So I went to my boss, actually the family, and the father and son, Milton and Stephen. And I said, guys, I want to buy some buildings. Would you help me? And they said, yeah, we'll invest with you and we'll introduce you to our investors and we'll help you every way we can. And that started me in buying buildings and syndicating to their investors and my own. And over the years, we bought over 100 properties. That's
Wow.
roughly $250 million worth. We've sold a bunch. We've round tripped 80 of them. So we only have 20 buildings at the moment. And we're looking to buy more. And I'm still actively syndicating. And it's been fantastically fun, except when the downturns come. During the downturns, I have had tremendous challenges.
Mm.
And 2008 was the worst, but there were 3 other really bad downturns during the period I've been in the business. So I know that it's a cyclical business. It goes up and down. It's not always up. And I'm very worried that right now we're in sort of the overheated, extended, really best time ever for industrial. And the party has to come to an end.
Yeah.
And I've seen the office buildings are struggling so badly. No asset class is immune when the market tanks. And because the office market has tanked, we're not that far behind. So right now I'm
Right.
being ultra careful to buy buildings. And by the way, we buy these days all cash, no mortgage, to be super safe and risk averse. Nobody else in the country does this that I even know of. But in my group, I've convinced my investors that all cash, no mortgage for us is a good idea.
Yeah. That's very interesting. And yes, that's kind of the opposite of what you hear in most asset classes. Let's maybe talk a little bit about that. First of all, in 2008, when I think industrial, I think of large companies. Maybe that's not the way to look at it. Guess maybe talk a little bit about what type of industrial properties you're currently buying.
There are 4 varieties of industrial, and I'm going to talk about 2 of them.
Okay.
One are the big boxes that you see on the side of the highway and the tollway. I know you have them all over Texas. You have them in San Antonio. That's where you'd find Amazon, for example, or Target's warehouse, for example. These are called big boxes. They're over 200,000 square feet. They're newer. They have very high ceilings. They're usually very attractive tilt up or precast, as we call it here in Chicago. And those buildings are called Class A industrial. Class B are older buildings, smaller buildings, lower ceilings, less loading docks, and they look different. They were built in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, as opposed to in the last 10 years. They are the most prevalent kind of building because many companies around the world are owned by families. These manufacturing companies, which is basically who are our tenants, are generally not huge corporations. We do have some. We have the U.S. Postal Service in a building for a package delivery building. We've got AT&T, where they have a fleet of vans that they have inside the building and in the back parking lot. And we've got other tenants. We've had over the years, we've had Comcast and General Motors and you name it. But these small industrial buildings are, let's say, 10,000 to maybe 50,000 square feet, and they're worth somewhere between $1 million and $5 million. And that's the kind of building we own. And most of them are occupied by companies that are manufacturers that are backed or owned by private equity groups and used to be owned by families. And the families generations ago, grandpa started the business, say, making, let's call it safety equipment for the welding industry. That's a very specific thing. Or a company that makes cups for yogurt, the yogurt, little yogurt cups. Yeah. Or equipment, magnets that go into computers, magnets that go into aerospace, into automotive, pumps and motor companies that they manufacture these little pumps and motors that go into vehicles or go into farm equipment. Those are our kind of buildings, and our tenants move in and they never move out because they have so much equipment, so many machines, and so many people who are trained employees that they can't leave. So our average tenant stays in our buildings for about 18 years.
Wow. Okay. And with that, what did you see in 2008? You mentioned it being cyclical. I would imagine if it's a business like that, I would think there would still be a demand, but maybe that's a bad assumption. So, did you have tenants that got behind on rent? Did you have to evict people? What did '08 look like in the industrial industry?
Yeah, it wasn't that bad.
Okay.
It wasn't bad for industrial like it was for so many other asset classes in real estate and the stock market and every other part of our economy. Industrial is resilient.
Yeah.
However, it's not so resilient that you're immune to the downturn. So what happened was I had 50 buildings. And of those 50 buildings, I had mortgages on all of them. And they are mostly single tenant buildings, which makes industrial riskier. We get better returns. We get 7 and 8% yields, cash on cash. Whereas in multifamily, for example, they're looking at 6. And on the coast, they're looking at something in the 5 cap rate. But in Chicago, we're getting 7 and 8 for those kind of buildings. The thing that happened to me was I wasn't yet doing all cash deals. So when the market got bad, some tenants left the buildings because if there's a company that's got, let's say, 5 buildings in an area, those tenants may get rid of one building to cut costs in a downturn. Unfortunately, we own some of those buildings that they moved out of. And they don't just move out and break the lease. Our leases are relatively short because they usually are like 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. And when we hit 2008, we had owned buildings for 20 years. So they had various lease expirations. And when they were coming up in 08, 09, and 10, and they would leave the building because they needed to save money, that would give us a vacancy. So just like the family that I worked for that had 10 vacancies in 1981, when interest rates were 17%. In 2008, I had 10 vacancies out of 50 buildings, and I had debt on them. So it was rough. I had to have these special relationships with my 7 lenders called forbearance agreements. And that's sort of like extend and pretend. They give you extra time to try to work it out before they come after you to foreclose. So I was really struggling with these 10 vacancies, very hard to fill, but we had to pay the mortgages. We had to pay the taxes. We had to pay the insurance. We had to pay the maintenance. We had to pay the utilities. And 10 buildings with mortgages and all those expenses are very hard to carry. So it was a rough time.
That makes sense. And kind of as I was asking the question you were starting to answer, I was thinking about, well, what if you have vacancies? I could see where that would be difficult to fill in a time when there is a downturn. And your explanation makes a lot of sense as to why that would be painful. So tell maybe before kind of learning the lessons of '08, what type of debt structure did you usually do with the industrial as far as a loan to value? How much debt did you usually carry on these?
Our average loan to value before 2008 was 60%. I had some at 70, So in some cases, we could borrow a lot and we thought we were really being smart and safe and we could borrow 90.
Right.
But
Yeah.
we had a number of them at 50. I thought 50 was super safe. But 50 is not safe when your value goes down 20% because 50 becomes 70. That's what happens.
Yeah.
If you got a, just using a really simple number, if you've got a $10 million building and you've got a $6 million loan and the value goes down by 20%, now it's worth $8 million, and you've got a $6 million loan, you've got a 75% loan to value where you thought you were so smart and had a 50% loan to value or a 60% loan to value. And the lenders have covenants. They've got 60 pages of loan documents. And one of the covenants is that your loan to value or your coverage ratio has to be at a certain level, or they have rights to put you into their workout department. And workout department people are really nasty. I think you ever see like there are certain people who may go into the military because they want to be tough with someone. They want to be tough with the people, the new recruits. And you've seen these guys. What are you doing? What are you doing? Those guys. Those are the guys. And the cops who like to stop people and be really tough with them when they roll the window down. It's like, sir, just give me your driver's license and your insurance. Well, those are the people in workout. They have no sense of humor. They think everybody's trying to trick them. Everyone's trying to manipulate them. So they're nasty, and they have no humility. And so I was dealing with all these workout people. I never did anything bad to them, but they were so nasty. They were just like mean girls. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so that's what happens when you get in trouble. You deal with workout, and ultimately either you work it out and save the day or you give the property back. Of our 50 properties, we had one foreclosure. I let it go. The building was worth an awful lot less than I thought it was, and the loan was too high. And I actually said to the lender, we'll keep it and we'll work it out. We'll make this work. And we had no personal guarantee on that one. A lot of our other deals had personal guarantees, but on that one we had no personal guarantee. And the lender said, I said, hey, George, I'm going to work this out. We're going to keep the building, and in a few years it'll be fine. I'm good with the forbearance agreement. And he said, we want a personal guarantee from you or we won't renew it. I said, well, you don't have one now and you're not going to get one. He says, well, then we're going to foreclose. I said, you don't have to. You can just have it. Take the property. Good luck. Because you don't know what to do with it as a banker. I know what to do with it as an owner. I can turn it around. You're just going to sell it for a loss. So if you're insisting on a personal guarantee, fuck you. Excuse me.
No, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, it seems like there really was, you were in a great position there for, as good of a position as you could be in, being in default, right? You don't have any personal guarantee. It's one of the few that you don't have that on. And I'm not sure what angle they were coming at with that. That didn't make any sense. I think I'd have the same response. So.
By the way, the bank wasn't my bank. My bank had failed. So this was a different bank and a different banker, someone I didn't know, because my bank, when they failed, got taken over. The FDIC put another bank in charge of it. And so now I'm dealing with another bank and a workout person who's not friendly with my banker because my banker was gone too. So when those things happen, it's rough. So by having no debt, I will never have that problem again. And again, we're the only people who do this. When I syndicate a deal, we just bought a deal for $1 million. It was a very small building, a 10,000 foot building. And we bought it and there's no debt and we're just not going to ever have to worry about a bank. So if the building goes vacant, we'll be able to carry it. We'll be able to refill it. And in the meantime, we've got a tenant in there who's paying us rent. It's a company that does automotive. They take really fancy cars and they replace the wheels with new wheels that are very colorful. It's a specialty business. And their lease is coming up in July. Industrial rents have gone up 60, 70, 80% in the last 5 years. Industrial's been that good. So this guy's paying he's paying $7 a foot, and the rent for the building should be 12. So I went to him and I said, his name is Armando. I said, I'm so sorry, but if you want to stay, the rent's going up to 11, even though you're now in the sevens. And he said, well, that's ridiculous. You can't do that. I said, why don't you study the market and figure out what rates are, and then let's talk again.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what he's going to do, but I know I can replace him as a tenant if he doesn't want to pay the rent.
Yeah, that was one of the big surprises, Joel, for me, was how short the leases were. I don't, maybe it was just, my perception ahead of time, but I just thought, I was always thinking those were really long-term leases. But in talking with some other industrial guys, it sounds like, because it changes and because the rates can go up so quickly, it makes more sense to do a shorter term.
Yeah, and a lot of companies don't like longer term leases because they need flexibility to either grow. If you sign a 15-year lease and your business grows in the fourth year and you can't stay in the building anymore, you need a bigger building, you don't want to be stuck with 11 more years of lease. So tenants generally fight for a shorter term lease unless there's a lot of build out. If there's a lot of build out, you've got to amortize it over the lease, and then they want a long term lease. Some companies are very old and predictable, and they know that their growth is going to be a certain level. So they lease a building that's bigger than what they need that they can grow into, and they'll sign a 10-year lease. But that's not common. 10-year leases are probably 25% of the time. Shorter leases are about 75% of the time.
Okay. And on those leases, are they triple net, or how is that set up?
They're rarely triple net. Triple net means that the tenant pays the taxes, insurance, and the maintenance. And they're not triple net because most tenants will not pay for a new roof if it has to be replaced. And they don't want to even pay major repairs on the roof, and they don't want to pay for a new HVAC system. So they're all represented by brokers. The industrial business is a broker-controlled business. We rarely have a new tenant come in without having a tenant rep. And the tenant reps, there's about 10 national or international firms. And in Chicago, there's 300 industrial brokers. And many of them belong to an organization called the Association of Industrial Real Estate Brokers. And a big number also belong to a national organization called the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. It's hard to break into industrial if you're not already in it. It used to be called an old boy network. There are actually very few women in our business. The brokers who are in the business, we all know each other. We see each other at conferences. We see each other at luncheons. And we do many deals together. And our word is our bond, and we shake hands on deals. We don't need that much in writing to begin with. So it's very different than other forms of real estate.
Okay. And maybe what are some of the differences there? With the property, is there anything different when it comes to, say, due diligence, or when you're out to try to buy something that maybe another asset class, wouldn't necessarily have?
Yeah, our roofs are very big, so we have to do great due diligence on the roofs and the mechanical systems, the sprinkler system, the plumbing system, the electrical, and especially the HVAC, because those systems only last for 15 to 20 years, as does a roof. And if it's going to need a tremendous amount of work, it's a lot of money. So we have to do great due diligence on that. But a real big one in industrial is also environmental. For many years, industrial manufacturers who work with metals have a product that they used to use, which was a degreaser. And it was, at the time, very popular to use it and to drip it on the floor and to dump it in the backyard when it got dirty. And that stuff is a carcinogen, and it never goes away. And so that has to be looked at really carefully. There's some real disastrous industrial underground tanks, also oil tanks and other kinds of tanks that have other kinds of environmentally contaminated liquids. So we have to be really careful on environmental.
When you have something like that, is that just, it comes up on the environmental phase one, and then what do you step away at that point, or do you say, okay, how can we remediate this? I guess there's a couple options there.
We always try to remediate it. We've got an environmental consulting firm here that we use called Pioneer Environmental. They look at every building we ever buy. They do a report. They do a phase one, and if necessary, a phase two, which means drilling to look for what's underground. And this TCE is the big one, trichloroethylene. That's that solvent that used to be used for degreasing metals. And so we often run into that. There are ways to remediate it or even leave it in place under a floor. And every state has an EPA. So Illinois has the IEPA, Illinois Environmental Protection Agency. And there's a voluntary program where we can figure out what to do to mitigate the spill. We just are working on a deal right now where there was a really bad spill and the seller didn't tell us. He hid it. You know, the old saying, buyers are liars. Sellers are worse liars. They right. They don't tell you all the things. It's like buyer beware. So this particular seller didn't tell us that there was a huge spill of TCE and it went into the ground and it not only contaminated what was right underneath it, but it leached, it spread under the ground. So it was all over underneath the entire building. And it even went outside of the underground of the building into the parking lot. And it started leaching into one of the neighbors' properties. You know, your neighbor is going to sue you if you put something in the ground. So we on that one went back to the seller. It was a $4 million purchase. And we said, look, we're going to have to clean this up and it's going to be a big deal. And Pioneer Environmental told us it was $1 million cleanup. So I went back to the seller. I said, what are you going to do about this? You didn't tell us that your father and uncle, when they owned the business, spilled this stuff. You're telling me you didn't know? Whoa, yeah, I didn't really, no, I didn't remember. Oh, yeah, that sounds familiar.
Okay. Yeah. Amnesia. Selective.
We recently almost bought a property. It was a 27,000 foot building. We were paying $1.9 million for it. And we found the HVAC was original equipment and the tenant had never maintained it. So it was on its last legs and needed to be replaced. That was $500,000 on a $1.9 million deal.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
How big did you say that one was as far as square footage?
27,000 square feet on 2 acres. Yeah. And it could be $20 a foot because you have to rip out the old system and then you have to replace it with a new system. And the whole building is air conditioned and heated. If it was just heated, it would have only been about $270,000. That was the number we got. So we were going to go to the tenant and say, how would you like just to have a heated building instead of an air conditioned warehouse? They're a manufacturer of communication equipment and they want their people to be comfortable in the warehouse. In Texas, you've got that problem.
Right.
You've got that problem in Arizona and Florida. In Chicago, there are many, many unair conditioned buildings. So I thought maybe the tenant could live with that, but they were unwilling.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, what about on those underground tanks? If you have that, what is the typical remediation for that? I mean, I've seen like at least with gas stations and stuff, being able to fill them with sand and some other things. But what do you typically see with that?
Yeah, same thing. It's the same as a gas station. The tanks are treated the same way, and they have to be inspected by the fire department. That's who does the inspecting of underground tanks in most communities. So, and it has to be registered that there was a tank with the state. So it's already on the state books. So we know if there's a tank when the environmental report is done by Pioneer, they say, oh, you've got a tank under there. It was in the report. So then they have to do some drilling and figure out if there's still any kind of chemicals in the tank. And if not, they have to drain it or fill it and they can leave it in place, and we get something called a no further remediation required letter from the state, which means you can
Okay.
leave it in place under the floor. But it does restrict the future use. If it's there, you can't build a daycare center or a residential community without cleaning it up.
Okay. So it may eventually have to be removed.
You pay now or you pay later.
Right.
I find
It's
that's true. That's true in all things in life. There's instant gratification and there's delayed gratification. When you're hungry and you're trying to lose weight and you keep eating, that's instant gratification. When you diet, it's delayed gratification. When we buy buildings, it's delayed gratification because there's so many things that we have to do up front that are unpleasant. And if we can, we put them off. That's how.
Right.
Otherwise, you'd never buy a building. If you find out the roof has only got 5 years left in it, either you fix it now or you fix it later. And we buy buildings with high hopes that we can make the roof last with some repairs for 10 years. So the due diligence is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Due diligence and structuring the deal to have a debt structure, which is in our case, no debt, so that if the tenant leaves or if something bad happens, we have staying power and we can get through the bad period.
Yeah, let's maybe talk a little bit about that. So when you're looking for a property and you're doing a raise, you're going to maybe include in there, well, obviously the purchase price, but then any items that you need to address right up front. When you're buying stuff, are you typically buying buildings that already have a tenant in there when possible, I guess? Yeah.
Yeah. Our most typical purchase is we buy buildings. Our average size is 25,000 square feet.
Okay.
And today that's $100 a square foot. So it's about a $2.5 million deal. So we raised $2.5 million. We have tenants who are generally owned by someone other than the original founder of the company. So we buy the buildings from families that used to own the business. Okay, so first of all, families fight with each other. I've only found 10% of families that are in business together that really love each other. 90% of the families that are in business together, when the dad starts the business, let's say grandpa started the business in 1935, and let's say that he was making some kind of metal parts that went into cars. Let's say spring. They make the springs that go into cars. And he was selling springs, let's say, to Ford Motor Company. And that was his big customer. So grandpa started the business. And as the kids got older, like the ages of yours and my kids, just finishing college, they'd say, hey, like the old family farm, let's bring the kid in the business. So they'd bring the kid in the business. So 23-year-old Bobby is in the business with dad. And then Sister Sue marries Jim. And Jim has a job. Jim's a gym teacher. Jim, the gym teacher. And the dad says, hey, why don't you join me and Bobby and come in the business? I'll quadruple what you make. I need someone to help me that I trust. So now you've got Bobby and you got the son-in-law, and the two of them don't get along. Just happens. They just don't agree. All right. And then the younger brother comes in the business. So now you got two brothers and a brother-in-law and the dad. While the dad's alive, he can control them by threatening them in subtle ways that they're not going to inherit the business and they're not going to inherit any money. So you guys better be good to each other.
Yeah.
But then dad dies. The brother-in-law and the two brothers are fighting. You know what? Let's sell the business. Get rid of each other. The wives are ready to get rid of each other. The husbands are ready to get rid of each other. So they sell to a private equity group that owns 30 companies, and they sell the business for $14 million. But the private equity groups don't want to own buildings. They want to lease buildings. So the family is stuck, even though the brother-in-law and the two brothers and all the wives hate each other. They now own the building together, and they're leasing it to XYZ company that bought them out. They collect rent. One of them's in charge. Now they have children themselves. Now there's a bunch of grandchildren that own the buildings. The brother-in-law died. His kids are in. And now you got 14 family members. It's time to sell.
Yeah.
I buy those. That's what I buy.
Nice.
So I buy from families where the tenant who's maybe got 3 years left on the lease is the company they used to own. And sometimes they're owned by a private equity group that's the second or third private equity group, because the private equity group may have bought it for $14 million and put some fairy dust on it and done some things to increase the revenue and sold it for $20 million to the next private equity group. So we deal with a lot of private equity groups. And we also deal with public companies that buy little companies. We've got a great tenant called Steiner Industries. They make safety products, and they're owned. The family sold the business. They all did get along, but they sold the business to a company called Bunzl that's on the London Stock Exchange that owns 70 manufacturing companies in North America. So Steiner's my tenant. Bunzl owns them. The Steiner family sold me the building. I love the Steiners. They're the 1 out of 10 that didn't hate each other. a father, a daughter, and a son. So we buy from people like that who just want to offload their buildings. And usually there's 2 years left, 3 years left. They mostly want to get rid of it when they see the leases coming up and they don't know what they're going to do if the building goes vacant. So they sell it hoping that I'll know what to do with it. And very often I get to renew the leases of the tenants. They just keep staying and staying.
Yeah, that's always when you're looking at somebody who's been there long term, they've got only a few years left on the lease. It's always the big question: are they going to stay? Are they not? Are they going to exercise the ability to get out? When you're looking at these, are you in a specific area geographically as far as what you're looking to buy?
Yeah, I have a very specific buy box. I call it a buy box.
Yeah.
The more laser focused you are, generally speaking, the more successful you're going to be. I know you know that because you're in the business and you have a specific kind of product that you buy, and you know what it is and where it is, and you got your specialty and your favorite locations. Because we're local to Chicago, most of our buildings have been in Chicago. And we have O'Hare Airport, which is sort of near the city, but far out enough that it takes a half hour to get there. And the industrial areas that have built up around many metropolitan cities has really become sort of like around the airport, because people don't want to live around the airport. They have to have something built there. And industrial companies don't mind that airplanes take off and land very noisily over the industrial parks. So O'Hare Airport is surrounded by industrial buildings, thousands and thousands of them. In Chicago, we have 16,000 industrial buildings. We have 20,000 industrial companies. And my specific buy box, near O'Hare or in the city, because the density of people in the city makes city buildings really special, because it's easier to get employees. There are more people that you can hire from the city. And so we have an area that if you were to stand in the middle of it and you're to get in your car and drive the circle around the area that we buy, it's about a 20-mile radius. And in that radius, we have 15 buildings right now. And we love that area. And the average size is 25,000. So I know what I'm looking for. I'm looking for 10,000 to 40,000 square feet in that area. So I know who to call to look for buildings to buy. I don't have to worry about going way out to the west suburbs. You know, the lake's on the east side of town. So you can't go east because you'd be wet. If you go way west or south or way north, there's a lot of industrial. But I don't like being that far out, because in the 4 downturns that I've been through, those properties that are way out are the last ones that lease when there's a lot of vacancy if the market tanks. In the ones that are closer in, there's just a bigger pool of tenants.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay. And with those, Yeah, and that's great. Your buybacks. When you're finding properties, are you reaching out directly to the group, like the family members that own the property, or are you finding these through brokers? Or is there a variety of that?
It's
What
everything.
exactly?
So
Okay.
there are three of us who more or less are the deal seekers in our company.
Hmm.
And we talk to brokers every single day. We talk to multiple brokers every day. We talk to dozens and dozens of brokers between the three of us every week because they bring us deals. They know off-market deals also. But in addition to that, we also have the list of the buildings we like the most, and we cold call those families ourselves. And I will stop at nothing to get to know those families. I will take grandpa out to lunch. I'll take the two brothers out to lunch. I'll get to know them. I'll go to their place. I'll bring them some Starbucks coffee and some donuts. One of my favorite clients, who's in 100,000 square feet here, has a bakery. He supplies a lot of food to Starbucks. So I will go and buy a load of his stuff and I'll bring it with me. You know how cops like donuts?
Yeah, yeah. Yes.
So do owners of industrial buildings. It's a miracle.
Yeah, yeah.
So I show up with the donuts. If I show up with a gift, something that's instant gratification, which is something tasty, I'll get in to see somebody. That's how I do it. I stop by someone's building. If I can't get them on the phone, I'll just stop in and say, I'm here to see George and I got the donuts. And
No, that's a
that
great
works.
strategy. Yeah, it's a great strategy for sure. I mean, and even if they're not super receptive the first go round, if if you're continuing, that's one advantage, right, of having such a tight buy box and being just right in your area. You really can't do that going out nationwide to form those kind of relationships. Sure, you can get the list of people, you could cold call them, but to really have that extra personal touch, it's nice that it's kind of in that tight area.
It is. And we build great relationships that way. We get to know people very well. And it's funny because many of the people that I've cold called and that have been targets to sell us their buildings, when I get to know them, they say, so tell me how I get into one of your deals as an investor. And people like that, industrial manufacturing company owners are the majority of my investors.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So that relationship building can really be twofold for you. That's great. What about, let's maybe talk a little bit, Joel, about the way that you're structuring these. So you're raising the capital for the entire amount. You have investors that come in. Most of them have existing tenants. And then you said, what kind of a preferred return are you typically doing on these? I know it can probably vary from deal to deal, but
yeah, it varies between 7 and 8.
Okay.
Yeah, and we usually try to tie the preferred to what the average annual return is for the first 10 years of ownership. We own long term.
Okay.
We have a building we've had in one case since 1989.
Oh wow.
And we've got a situation where because we own long term, some of our investors like the idea that we can get them out of a deal. Since I have 250 investors, if someone wants to get out of a deal, I will contact the other investors and say, hey, there's some equity available in this deal that we've owned for a while. Who wants to buy out Frank? Frank says to me, I want to get out. I have $1 million with you in 10 deals. So 100,000 each. So I can go to my other investors and say, who wants to buy Frank out for 100,000 each?
Yeah.
And there's an SEC rule that says that you can do that and it's not considered selling securities. It's called Rule 144. So when someone wants to get out, we call it, he wants to do a 144. And every year, I'd say maybe 7 or 8 investors want to get out and 7 or 8 then replace them. And that Rule 144 allows us to do that with a single page assignment agreement, which is very easy.
Okay. So even one that you've owned for quite some time, you're not having to come back out with a private placement memorandum. It's just a one pager that you're transferring the equity basically from this person to this person.
Yeah, I'm in Florida for about 10 days, and I met with some of the investors for lunch last week. And one of them, his name is Frank, said to me, I've got $1.4 million with you. I'd like to divest of this for personal reasons. He's been in the deals for about 20 years. So I'm going to put out a notice to all my other investors. Hey, if somebody wants to get out of these deals, and I've got $1,400,000 of equity. Who wants it? And I'll do it in chunks of 25,000, 50,000, 100,000. Those are our average investor probably puts in about 80,000, because we have a bunch who are under 50 and under, and we have a bunch who are 100 and over. So our average investor at 80,000, sometimes they'll stretch to 150,000. We have a bunch of people who like to do 300 and 250,000. And then there's a whole bunch who say, I'll only do 25 per deal. I don't want anyone to invest more than 3% of their net worth with me.
Right.
If they do, they're crazy. If they do more than that, they're nuts. Diversification is really important. And they look at my stuff as sort of safety stuff that gives them a pretty safe cash on cash cash flow yield. And they like it. But I pretty much tell them, if you've got too much with me, you're making an error. You should spread it around. You should have a number of syndicators you're with, and you should have some stocks, and you should have some bonds, and you should have some gold. You should have a lot of things so that if any one of them goes bad, you don't lose it all. I've got one friend who had one stock, and he had he bought it for $1 million, and it went up 100 times. So he had $100 million worth of stock, and he kept it. And then the company got in trouble. So then he had a lot less than 100 million. So he should have diversified and taken some of the 100 million and bought other things.
For sure.
But so if someone's got a net worth of, let's say, 5 million, I don't think they should put much more with me than $150,000 or $200,000. I think that's enough.
Yeah,
that's enough. Yeah,
yeah. No,
that makes sense. If they have a $10 million net worth, 300,000. And certainly, no one should put any more than 1 or 2% of their net worth in any one deal. So if they're with me for 3 or 4 or even 5%, which would be a stretch, 500,000 for a person who's got a $10 million net worth, that's all they should do.
Yeah. Okay. And what about with these properties? Are you doing any kind of cost segregation? And maybe if so, what does that look like on the industrial side? As far as how much you're able to depreciate, that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's the same as it is for mobile home parks, more or less. It's similar to multifamily. This cost segs, they're done by an engineer and an accountant working together in concert. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it this way, it makes your cash flow tax-free. Well, tax deferred. There's no such thing as tax-free.
Right.
But it makes it tax deferred for the first few years, which is great. 7% return is really like a 10% return.
Yeah.
Because you're getting tax-free 7%. So it's like making 10 and paying taxes on 10.
For sure. How about any of the properties you've bought? Have they been in opportunity zones by chance?
Yes, but we don't do opportunity zone work because opportunity zones have a lot of rules, and we're not spending a lot of money to fix up our buildings. We don't do much redevelopment. We don't do any development. So the problem is if you don't spend the required amount on improvements, you don't get the benefits. And opportunity zones are generally not done deal by deal. They're done in a fund, and we don't do funds. We just do one deal at a time.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I'd ask. I'd heard that on one of my last guests. But you're right. You have to increase your basis considerably in order, to take advantage of that, and so makes total sense. How about Joel? Where can people find out more about you if they want to maybe get onto your mailing list to be able to find out what you have coming up next?
Yeah, we have a pretty active website. It's called BritProperties.com, BRIT with one T, properties.com. And they can find us there. They can see some articles. There's an article on there called Why You Should Not Invest With Us, which is really a good article. Yeah, it's like a warning of what people should be asking before they go into anybody's deals.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. That's good. Kind of the opposite of what you'd expect to see on the website, but
Right.
Yeah, I could see where it would help be helpful to kind of know, hey, what are the questions that we need to ask here? So, and as far as finding out more about you, the website's the best place to go.
Best place,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, we've got a lot of videos, we've got a lot of articles. Talks about what we do and how we do it with the debt-free situation. It's pretty comprehensive.
Okay, fantastic. Well, Joel, this has been really good, and kind of a different, just a different perspective. I love the fact that you're doing the debt-free investing. It's contrary to what I've usually heard, but it makes total sense, and certainly puts you in a better position for any future downturn. I've got two additional questions that I ask every guest, Joel, and I want to ask you, for somebody who's maybe just starting out their investment journey, what advice would you give them?
So for me, what's helped me the most is having relationships with really smart people and people who are sophisticated investors. So seeking them out is the most important thing, and building a relationship with them, bringing them the donuts or taking them to lunch and getting to know those people. I have a very short list of people that I totally trust. There's 8 of them on my list.
Okay.
And these are the people that they don't let me make a mistake because they ask great questions.
Yeah.
And then they invest because we do a Zoom call together, and we invite other investors to be on the Zoom call. But it's getting that core group of people who have the experience and the wealth of knowledge and the wealth of dollars.
Yeah, no, that's a great advice. How about a book recommendation? And it doesn't have to be real estate related, but it certainly can be just something that you've read recently that's been impactful.
My favorite book is called The 4 Agreements. Have you heard of that one by Ruiz?
I have.
It's great.
I don't think I have not read it. I've heard of it, but I'll have to put that one on my list.
It's a 2-hour read, and it's life-changing. If you follow his 4 rules, it's really great.
Okay. Now I'll have to check that out. I think that's the first time we've had that recommended. So I appreciate it, Joel. This has been great. I appreciate you joining me on St. Patrick's Day, and we will go ahead and call it a show.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Joel.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.